got to know everything or adhere to the God who does know all things?
First of all, what's wrong with appealing to absurdity?
So when my pastor first began to talk with me about being an evangelist, he said, Tommy, I just want to tell you, he says, your gift's not for you. Your gift is for everybody else in the church. And man, if I can leave anything with you, let that be today. Okay, that fact, that your gift as an evangelist, as Bill just prayed, you're to go back and to benefit your local church with your passion, with your zeal, with your constant reminder, hey, we're going out. Oh, you're fine. Sure, go ahead. Yeah, you're fine. You're on camera. You're all right. So, guys, before we get started, just take that to heart. That is constant reminding people that you're going out. Okay. So the thesis for lesson 7 is preparing all in evangelism and preparing the evangelist. Okay. So not everybody's called to be an evangelist, but everybody is called to do the work of the evangelist. But not everybody is the evangelist. So everybody's called to do evangelism. So the first step you've got to do, or you have to be patient. Okay, because not everybody's got Dave's zeal. Not everybody's got Alex's or Peter's or Bill's zeal. They are bound up with fear. They're bound up with doubt. They fear man. They fear they don't have the right words to say. They fear that there are 20 million objections to the Christian faith that they have to answer. They have to have an answer for all 20 million before they go out and share their faith. So all these lies that they believe, it's going to take time to purge these things from these people's minds. I've had men, when they've gotten in the car with me, they said, Tommy, all hell has broke loose in my home today, and the last thing I wanted to do was come here, but I knew the Lord wanted me to be here. So that's another component. Hell is going to rage against them, against their home, against their minds. So be very, very patient with them. God has been very patient with us. And so the zeal that you have injected into your soul is not yours. It's a gift of the Holy Spirit. And to see it as that. Sometimes I think we can take our zeal and our passions for granted, that we just assume that everybody else has the same zeal and the same passion that God has infused us with. And that's just not the case. So remember that. So be very, very patient with them. All right. Point number 2 is be persistent. Okay? Your role as an evangelist is to remind people. Mark 8:36 is what we're to remind people the reality of. Okay? Let me read it for you. Mark chapter 8, verse 36. Says this, for what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? So we are constantly to remind the church, listen, if we're not sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ with people, they're losing their souls and going to hell. Now that's a theological, doctrinal reality of the Scriptures. And people in the church, people who are called to do evangelism, people who are an evangelist, but they've never been challenged to ask if they're an evangelist, because they don't know what this is bubbling up in them, because people aren't discipling evangelists within the churches anymore. Because they just push that calling, that Ephesians 4:11 gifting from the church off to the side. They don't really think about that on a daily basis, that people are going to go to hell. You are to remind them of that. They're so busy with their jobs, they're so busy with their life, they're so busy doing church things, which are good things, food pantries, Awana, all these good things, deacon ministries, taking care of the needs of benevolence ministries, that they don't take the time to think about the reality of heaven and hell on a daily basis. So it's your job to be the cheerleader, to be the reminder, to be persistent in their life. So I had a guy one time tell me, he's now a pastor, he said, Tommy, every time I see you, he said, I'm reminded of how I don't share the gospel. Now, don't be prideful. Protect your heart from pride. But I saw that for the first time in my life when he said that was many years ago, wow, I have been given a gift from God. And I was reminded of my pastor's voice, that's not my gift, that's God's gift to me to encourage the church. So remember that you, when people see you, people are thinking about the gospel. If you're out there, if you're posting on Facebook, if the church knows what you're doing. I actually had one elder tell me this. He said, Tommy, when I saw you coming, I would go the other way because I didn't want to hear another story about God doing something in somebody's life, and I know He would do through me if I would just be willing to share the gospel. He said, so I didn't want to hear it, okay? But this was an elder being transparent before me, telling me this. So guys, you have influences in your churches that you have no idea what you're doing to your churches in a positive way. Be patient, be persistent, okay? All the material possessions in the world mean nothing. A soul can be lost for eternity. Have we ever come to terms with the people ending up spending eternity in hell? So remind those people that. Remind your congregation, remind the people at your church that. Be passionate. Man, tell stories. I mean, just be passionate. Don't go around ho-hum, face hung down. Well, I was out on the street the other day, man. Man, be passionate. Be zealous. Man, God's doing something out there. You need to be a part of it. Come out and be a part of it. I mean, communicate with newsletters, emails, share your experiences. That's why we video and stuff. I want to catch that experience. I want to catch that time that Alex is having that conversation with that atheist. That's why I'm slapping a lapel mic on you guys, because we need to catch these stories to bring it back to the church because they get excited. Man, we have one guy, he partners with our ministry. He has been wanting to come out for years, him and his wife, and finally they come out. And we have dinner, my wife and I, and we're talking about a little bit of what they may experience. And then I began to pray, and the wife tells me afterwards, she said, Tommy, why in the world did you pray for persecution? Why did you pray for a heckler? And I said, well, you wait and see what God will do. And so she was deathly scared that somebody was going to physically hurt me, and she was going to have to physically see that. And she was just distraught by it. But anyway, long story short, the family, they come out and they experience what it's like to share their faith. And man, they were just lit afire. I mean, just for me, being patient, being persistent, being passionate, communicating the stories of what God's doing out there. So they come and so he write the whole write-up about it, and he's engaging, a heckler comes up and some people come in, I'm engaging that guy. The guy goes from being a heckler to really asking inquisitive questions. I hand him off to Robert, and Robert spends probably 30, 40 minutes with the guy. Robert's an ex-Catholic. This guy is a Catholic, so it was just an instant connection there. So the Holy Spirit really had its hand in what was going on that night. But if I wouldn't have been passionate and communicating what God's doing in the streets, then they would probably never come out. All right? The next thing, be a storyteller. Okay? Be able to communicate your stories. All right, just like I told you, when you have an encounter with a police officer, just like John said yesterday, go home and write your story while it's still fresh in your mind. If you guys are not journaling, you better be journaling, because you are experiencing a lot of stuff. Once again, you take it for granted. Man, I just had 5 conversations yesterday. Do you realize the average church person doesn't have 5 conversations about the gospel in a year, and you do it in a few hours? Go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say, I've only been doing street ministry consistently for a year. Inconsistently for 2 years since the San Francisco Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen it already when I post pictures when we go to Yonkers or wherever.
Yeah.
And videos. That stuff works, and we're not doing it to grandstand. To say
Yeah.
we're better than you.
Yeah. Please don't do that way. If you do, don't post them. Yeah.
Yeah. At first, it can be convicting to the person who knew they should be engaging with the gospel. Over time, encouraging, and then motivation. In the short period of time it's been for me, I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, let's schedule a date. I want to go out with you.
Amen.
Me and my wife want to go out with you.
Praise God.
Even,
Yeah.
I don't know, been saved for 10 years, and a person that I haven't seen in 5 years from a couple churches ago that we used to go to reached out to me last week. Hey, I'm free on Saturdays. Can I go with you guys?
So be this storyteller. People like stories. They don't tell lies. And what you're going to have to protect your heart from, just being transparent, as time gets away from the story, you'll have a tendency sometimes to embellish. So be real careful. Don't embellish. Try to be as truthful as you can. Don't lie, but tell stories. And be very truthful, a very truthful storyteller, because people, that engages people. Acts 5:15-12. I'm going to read that real quick for you. Acts chapter 15, verse 12. All the people kept silent, and they were listening to Barnabas and Paul as they were relating what signs and wonders God had done through them among the Gentiles. Okay? So we have this fact of storytelling all through the Old Testament and New Testament. Communicating. Bill and I, we've talked about this several times. You are a communicator. If you're an evangelist, you're communicating. If you're an evangelist, you should be a writer. If you're an evangelist, that's your job. Get better at it. Get used to it. If you're not good at it, work at it. Take some classes on writing or take some classes on communication. This is what God has called you to do. Get better at it. Okay? All right, so you're a storyteller, and you have to be a teacher. Okay? Evangelism, the old saying is more caught than taught, but you still got to be able to teach. You still got to be able to communicate the fundamentals of what somebody has to say. So, for example, I'll give you an example of that. Kaysen is a pastor out in West North Carolina. He took our curriculum online. We did a Google Hangouts with him and about 4 other guys, and I took them through this curriculum. And Kaysen was on Facebook. He said, "Tommy, I'm really enjoying the Facebook Live stuff, but could you do a video where you went from handing out a tract to engaged in a conversation with somebody?" He said, "I'm having trouble really kind of working through that, how to start that conversation." So yesterday we did a Facebook Live of that very thing. And so he was able to see through Facebook Live how I went from handing out a tract to engaging in a one-on-one conversation with somebody. So you have to be able to teach, and sometimes with modern technology, you can do it through Facebook Live, or you can do it through Google Hangouts. So with technology that you have at your fingertips today, you can disciple evangelists all over the world. So take advantage of it, but be willing to be that teacher. 1 Corinthians 11:1, we have a ministry of imitation, okay? So 1 Corinthians 11:1 says this. 1 Corinthians 11:1. Be imitators of me, just as I also am of Christ. So the Christ you see in me, or the Christ you see in Bill, or the Christ you see in each other, imitate it. That's all we are, just little Jesuses. We're just striving to, I'm not saying we're gods or anything like that, but we imitate what we see in our Savior. We imitate what we see in the Scriptures to the best of our abilities. We're constantly just imitating. That's why when I hear you guys say something, I'm going to use it. If I think it's got a clear theological, really good bend to it, and it's got maybe a good catchy, edgy way to say something, like Robbie, the bootleg gospel. I told him, I went up to him, I said, "Young man, I'm going to use that one." I said, a false gospel is a bootleg gospel, man. It's not the true gospel. So it's to be a teacher, to be able to communicate. We need to teach them the importance of prayer, the importance of planning, and the importance of going out and sharing the gospel. So this is a point that I don't want to miss here. And you get this from Bill. Hopefully you get it from me. That you have to be planned and organized. So if you're going to start a pocket of people in your area sharing the gospel, you have to be communicating, you have to be a storyteller, you have to be passionate, you have to be persistent, but you have to be able to say, okay, I'm the point guy, I'm the leader. So that's why we raise up leaders at GGM. The leaders, I consider them the point guys. These are the guys that I can go to, that he's in Durham. I trust him. He goes to church. I know him. I've poured into him. I know Seth Richardson. So anybody in the Durham area or anybody who wants to go out preaching, I'm pointing them to Seth because he's the lead guy there. He's organized. He's going out to the Durham Bulls game. He's in downtown. He's at the clinic there. So you have to be able to communicate with your people, whether you have a calendar or whatever it is that you're sending out. You have to be able to communicate, okay, I'm going to be at point A at a specific time, at a specific place. And when these new people come out, give them the opportunity to ask you questions. Let them know kind of what they're going to be experiencing. So for example, if I'm going to an out rally and I have a new person with me, I'm not going to just throw them out there. I'm going to tell them, okay, you're going to experience some hostility. You're going to experience opposition. People are not going to like us being there at times. Some people will thank us for being there, but some people it's going to be really hostile. If I'm going to the arts festival, well, this is going to be a family-friendly event. Won't be a lot of hostility. There'll be some mocking and scoffing, but a little more chill. So just explain to your people, especially the new people who are coming out, what they may be. So you're persistent, you're patient, you're passionate, you're a storyteller, you're a teacher. And another component, the last component, is for these newer people who are coming out with you, you've got to take time to teach them how to share their faith. Because just like you said, Alex, the church on whole is not doing a very good job at teaching people how to communicate their faith. But that's your role as an evangelist. You got to go in and you got to help teach these people. You got to help coach them. You got to help direct them down this path. I had a guy out with me one night. He was a newer guy, and I thought I'd communicated with him well. And he came up to me and his hands were shaking. He said, "Tommy, I am so nervous, but I want to share my faith." And so I said, "Okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to take this tract. It's a $100 question tract, the ones I had printed up." I said, "You're going to put it in your hand. The next person you're going to see, you're going to thrust it toward them and ask them, have they received one yet? And if they haven't, put it in their hand and go, it's got the $100 question on it." He said, "What's the $100 question?" "Where you're going to go when you die." And I said, from there, he knew the WDJD method pretty good. I said, just walk them through the WDJD method. He says, "Okay." I said, "You can do this. I know you can. I know you can do it." So, man, he's walking down the street, and this guy comes up to him, and he thrusts the card out. He said, "Sir," he says, "have you got one yet?" The guy says, "What is it?" And so with a cocky attitude, I'm like, oh boy, Lord help him. He says, "It's the $100 question. Where are you going to go when you die?" The guy kind of snatched it out of his hands. He looked at it. He said, he shoved it in his back pocket. He says, "Nobody's come back from the dead before." And I'm thinking, man, I hope he responds to this the way I want to respond to it. And then John's a very intellectual guy. It's kind of like you, John, very intellectual. He works with numbers and computers and letters all the time. He said, "Well, sir, there are two people who come back from the dead." He said, "One's Jesus Christ and one's a person named Lazarus." And the guy was kind of taken back by it. He didn't know the Bible well. So John, man, it was just like a guy Olympic diver jumping off a diving board. Once he got off the board, it was beautiful, you know. So I just kind of sat back and I said, man, he just had to get over that hump. Sometimes people just need to get over that hump. I had one guy come to me one time. He said, "Tommy, you don't realize I am so nervous. I can't believe I'm here." I said, "Well, you're here, so you're out now. You're going to do it." And I said, this is what you're going to do. I said, "You're going to take the camera in your right hand, and you're going to take the tracts in the other hand." And I said, "While you're videoing, as people walking past, you hand out tracts. Just hand them out. That's all you do. Just hand them out. Don't even say anything. Just hold them out. As people come by, and some people will take them." He says, "Okay, I got it. So I get back, and I begin watching the video. The video is just of the ground and him having gospel conversations with people. But he needed that camera in his hand to get him over the hump. So find out what is the hump your new people have to get over, and just help them get over the hump. Because, man, I'm going to be honest with you, majority of people in my church are a lot better preachers than I am. See, they're better than me in preaching, but they can't preach a better gospel. So what I tell them, and listen, you know more theology than I do. You know more about the Bible than I do. You just got to get over your fear. And so to listen to that guy have these conversations, I'm like, man, this dude is really sharp. But he had to get over that. He had to get over that fear. So sometimes God will use you to bring more people out who are better at in theology and communicating their faith than you are. But God uses you to help them get over the hump. Okay.
Sometimes I think people need to be sort of deputized, right? We're so used to having leaders, having bosses, having teachers and stuff over us that for some people, I think when it's time to just go out and do it, it's like, am I supposed to do this? You know, but when you have a calming influence like you or you
Correct.
or whoever you say, hey, here's what I want you to do, then people are like, okay, well now I'm following orders, now I can go do this.
Correct.
And it
Correct.
just kind of takes the burden off.
And I think that's a lot of American mentality, right? Just like you said, that's the way a lot of America is set up. You have leaders and everyone kind of falls in under that. And it's biblical also. So when you become the point man, when you become that leader, now that person can kind of rest a little bit to go, okay, if I've got an issue, I can go to Seth. Or if I got any issue, I can go to Chris. Or if I got an issue, I can come to Dave. And to know that it's okay to be that person because that's the position God has put you in, okay? You want to submit to your leaders. You want to submit to your elders at your church, of course. But talk with them about this. Sit down. If you hadn't had a conversation with your elder about what the Lord's called you to do, shame on you. You need to take time to do that because that's a very, very important part of your ministry, okay? So training them with the WDJD method, that's the most simple way I've seen people just to communicate the gospel. Would you consider yourself to be a good person? Do you know any commandments on Judgment Day? Would you be guilty or innocent? Does that concern you? They can grasp that. That's just the nuts and bolts of the gospel, right? So to train them in that way, get them used, maybe let them hang around the good person test sign and let them give people the good person test to start out with. So just get them used to being out there, being around, okay? Give them the method to share their faith. WDJD is not the only way to share their faith, but it is a very biblical way to share their faith, okay? For you guys, you need to go and study Ephesians 4:11 through 16. That's one thing my pastor made me do here at the end of this lesson. I want you to do. My pastor came to me. He said, "Tommy," he said, "what's your role? What do you do?" And it's a good way. It's a good segue for our next lesson, because Ephesians chapter 4:11 through 16, you're going to see your giftedness and how you should walk in it, and what it entails, and all the details that it entails. In my book, In Through the Harvest Field, hopefully if it ever gets published, that we walk through that passage pretty extensively to help you kind of think through that passage well. Okay, that's the close of this lesson. Any questions? Anything to add to that you guys have? To know that you have to disciple evangelists, and as you disciple evangelists, you need to be working with people in evangelism. What you need to do is you want to reproduce yourself within your local church. You want to find other evangelists in your church. So whether it's a church of 25 people or 2,500 people, I promise you there's more than one evangelist there. God is just sovereign. Yes, sir.
I think I've said it before probably 100 times, but oftentimes we are the people who, once we start going out consistently, then other people come and join us. So our job is to be the consistent prophet, so to speak, out there. And so keep that in mind. When you look out in the field, no one's there. Well, you're the guy that's supposed to go start it all, basically. And your consistency really fuels all that Tommy's talking about.
Amen.
I mean, that Alex has talked about and John's talked about, and that's another role that we play.
I totally agree. And one thing that you'll see, Galatians 6:9 tells you this. It's a prophetic word for us, that you remain faithful and you'll be fruitful. Just remain faithful, remain consistent, remain persistent, remain tenacious, and people are going to begin to follow. And what you're going to see, it'll ebb and flow. People will come and go, but then you'll get the consistent ones who begin to come out on a consistent basis from your church or from your community. And that's what you want. And the ones who ebb and flow, maybe they'll come back around, and then new ones will come in. But you remain that consistent person, that point person, that beacon of light that people go, oh, well, I hang out with Tommy, I'm going to share the gospel. That's what's going on with Brian. What's going on in his life. His mom and dad let me hang close with him because they said, well, if you hang out with Tommy, you're going to be sharing the gospel. And hopefully that's not me being prideful. If it is, Lord, show me. But you are that person in your church. And you are called to be that person, that have that type of attitude.